So today I am freezing some potatoes. So we had a really good harvest of potatoes this year, but we haven't been able to make our way through them all. So we are now going to freeze the potatoes. I'm going to do 3 freezing methods, roast, mash and croquettes. To start with, for all the recipes, you need to wash and peel your potatoes. So I'm just going to make my way and wash all the potatoes and then peel them all, and then you'll see I'm putting them into 2 piles. I have my pile for roast potatoes, which are these slightly bigger potatoes, and then these smaller ones I've put to one side for the mash and the croquettes. And then once they're all peeled, we are then going to do the roast potatoes first. So in a saucepan full of water, pop your potatoes in, and once the water is at a boil, you then want to boil them for 15 minutes. Just pop a knife in the middle of the potato, making sure that it is cooked all the way through. Then drain off the water. You can save it, by the way, if you want, and use it for stocks. Or if you want, you could pour it on the garden because it will have nutrients in it, so it'd be quite good watering water. Once all the water has been poured away, you then just want to let the potatoes steam dry just for a couple of minutes, just to make sure there's no water on them. So you want to put a tablespoon of oil in. I used vegetable oil, but you ideally want to use a flavourless oil. A tablespoon of flour. And then I put a tablespoon of rosemary in, but you can put whatever herbs and spices you want in. So I do garlic ones as well, which are really nice. Thyme, sage, anything like that, anything you want. Then I salt and peppered it to taste. Then pop the lid on and give it a really good shake. So not only is that going to distribute all your herbs and spices and everything, but it's also going to make them really fluffy, which is really good for a roast potato. And then you want to lay them out on a tray, making sure none of the potatoes are touching. And once the potatoes are cooled, you then want to pop it in the freezer. Once the potatoes are frozen through, then you want to remove them from your tray, pop them in a bag, and then you can pop them in the freezer and keep them in the freezer as long as you want. And then when you do want to cook them, you want to cook them in a preheated oven at gas mark 7 or 220 degrees centigrade or 200 degrees fan assisted for an hour, turning halfway through. Then for the mash. Again, having put our potatoes in a saucepan full of water, you want to bring the water to a boil and boil it for 15 minutes, popping a knife in the middle, making sure it's cooked all the way through. You just want to drain that water away again. Just let the potatoes air dry for a couple of minutes just to make sure the water's not still on the potatoes. And then I add a glug of milk and a cube of butter. I don't measure out my butter and milk. I just put how much I want by eye and then mash it. And then once it's as mashed as you want, you're simply going to let it cool and then pop it into containers to freeze. So you can use bags if you want. I find it easier to use like the takeaway containers because they stack nicer in the freezer. And then when you want to use it, all you want to do is take it out of the freezer, let it defrost, and then you want to microwave it for 3 to 4 minutes. I always put a bit of butter in them, just scattered over the top, just because it can get slightly dry. So if you put the butter in, it'll soak through, and then it'll just make sure that you've got, it'll just make sure that it is nice and moist throughout, so then you're not eating dry mashed potato. And then for the croquettes, put your potatoes in a saucepan full of water. Once the water is at a boil, then you want to boil it for 15 minutes. Then drain your water away. Then just let your potatoes dry just for a couple of minutes just to make sure that there's no water on them. And then you want to add some butter. So I do this by eye, so I add a block of butter, a good glug of milk, some salt and pepper to taste. And then just mash it together until you've got a really creamy mashed potato. And then we're actually going to form the croquettes now. So in one bowl I have some golden breadcrumbs, in another bowl I have plain flour, and then I add some milk to an egg and just give it a little whisk. And then what you want to do is you want to take your potato, you want to form it into your croquette. You then want to roll it in your flour, so then it's covered in the flour. Roll it in the egg, so it's covered in the egg. And then roll it in the breadcrumbs, so it's covered in the breadcrumbs. And then you want to pop it on a tray, making sure that they don't touch. Pop that in the freezer to allow them to freeze throughout. And once they're frozen throughout, you then take them off the tray, put them into a bag, and then pop them in the freezer and then store them in there until you're ready to use them. When you are ready to use them, pop them in a preheated oven at gas mark 7, 220 degrees centigrade or 200 fan assisted for 45 minutes. I always turn mine halfway through just to make sure that they cook evenly. There you go. That's how I freeze my potatoes for roasties, for mash and for croquettes. I hope that helps. But yeah, cheers.